Event last night, we learned Donald Trump's margin of victory in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, and in Michigan even narrower, just 82,424 total votes. Now I want to bring in CNN political commentator David Swerdlick, CNN political contributor Hillary Rosen, and KBC Talk Radio host John Phillips. All right, here we go. Good evening to all of you. Hillary, there is no denying that this was an ugly campaign and there are some hard feelings, but should Democrats move on now?
Well, the whole point of this session was to actually look backwards, and so I think it's inevitable that the pain and suffering would have been coming to the forefront. Look, this was actually razor thin, and I think knowing, and it gets more razor thin every day as the votes are finalized, and so this is a team that worked their butt off for 2 years, gave up a lot, and believed in this, and it was personal. And Kellyanne said something that I don't necessarily disagree with her when she said, look, we realize that voters care more about what affects them than what offends them. That's a good line. But I think that what was happening for the Clinton team, for our side, is what was said was affecting us and was affecting our people. And so I think it made it extra personal.
Mm-hmm. Why'd you say it was a good point, David?
Well, I think Hillary's right on that score. I mean, Kellyanne Conway, again, she did have a fair point there, but maybe voters voted for Trump because he was talking about things that affected them versus offended them, but there were millions and millions of people out there who were offended and took offense at Trump calling Judge Curiel, saying he couldn't do his job because he was Mexican.
That affects Mexicans.
Right.
Well,
that affects Mexicans, not just offends them, but it affects them as a society.
It affects and offends.
Right.
President-elect Trump being, at one point at least, the public face of the birther movement, on and on, et cetera, et cetera. So I think Kellyanne Conway has a basic overall point that Democrats need to look to the future. But I think that Democrats, including Jennifer Palmieri, have a point that the Trump campaign ran a very divisive, at times nasty campaign.
Do you think, John, I want you to weigh on this because he said it's a divisive, nasty campaign. People said it was vicious. He mocked, belittled, ridiculed people, insulted women and minorities, told an awful lot of lies about Hillary Clinton, his opponents, about the press, the whole electoral system. And as Kellyanne Conway, I think, admitted there, they said, people are more concerned about what affected them than offended them, so they weren't afraid to offend people. Is he responsible for the bad feelings that remain?
Well, look, partisanship has existed long before Donald Trump. This campaign was vicious. The primary was vicious. Campaigns in the past
This was different than just partisanship.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, I think the larger issue as to why the nerves are so raw with a lot of the Clinton folks is that they never expected to lose. They went into Election Day thinking they were going to win. They thought that Donald Trump was a joke. They treated him like a joke. They didn't think that he had a credible campaign that had any shot at all at winning any of those industrial Midwest states. He ended up pulling it out, and I think they were shell-shocked. And what you saw at that forum at Harvard was them repeating the same mistakes that they made during the campaign. Mm-hmm. Instead of looking in the mirror, looking at the mistakes that they made, they're attacking Donald Trump. They're continuing to go after him. And what have the Democrats done since then? They reelected Nancy Pelosi as minority leader in the House. They elevated Chuck Schumer.
You're echoing what Kellyanne
right,
said.
And Keith Ellison at the DNC. But and that's not going to help them win these white working class voters that they just lost.
To give you that point, and I think that you have a point there. I think that Kellyanne has a point there as well. But do you think that do the Clinton folks have a point about the nastiness of the campaign, about the fake stories, about the negativity, about what Hillary and David just said about what may affect people, or may just be you think is offensive to people? It does affect their lives. When you say that the first black president should show his birth certificate, that affects African Americans.
Look, the general election wasn't any nastier than the primary election. The primary was a very vicious process, and many of those people have been brought back into the tent.
I mean, John, quite honestly, that's not an answer to my question.
Look,
well, Don,
it was.
Don,
you're answering my question. Hold on, David. You're answering my question about the election with another question about the election.
No, I'm saying elections are nasty all the time, and people get over it.
Yeah, I agree with that. But this was quite different. Come on, John. We sat here for what, 18 months? And said, oh my gosh, I can't, some of the things that Donald Trump said, you couldn't even believe he said it.
Well,
But,
many
you know,
of those things, by the way, were said in the primary.
Yeah.
The
I
John
do think
McCain
that
remark
that
was
was
said in
a-
the primary.
The
Yeah.
common denominator in the primary and the general was Donald Trump. Again, he won the election fair and square, and I agree with John that Democrats need to start looking forward.
Right.
But I don't think it's wrong for Democrats to point out some of the divisive language used by Trump and others of his surrogates, both in the primary and the general.
But you know, part of I think the frustration that boiled over in these last 2 days, and that we're talking about it again, is we made a big mistake as Democrats in sort of chasing the bright, shiny object of rhetoric. We really thought that that was going to be enough, that somebody who acted this way would never be elected president. And polls showed repeatedly, and the exit polls showed, people didn't think he was fit to be president, but they voted for him anyway.
Well, that's what John just said.
Well, that's my
yeah.
point. And so what I'm saying is, I think as Democrats, we thought that was going to be that was the campaign. It wasn't the campaign Hillary Clinton started. She started a campaign on education and family medical leave and equal pay and criminal justice reform. And we ended it on, this guy just can't be our president. And so I think that the point that Kellyanne made that our team had a hard time hearing yesterday, because it's painful to hear, is, you know what? People really just don't care when you insult them, when you insult other people. There weren't enough people who cared about insults. Really, the change issue, just like wanting something different, moving away from the current administration, was a more powerful message, and I think that just hurt.
Yeah.
At a certain point, too, Democrats are going to have to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is they nominated a bad candidate.
Yeah. I got to go.
believe if
John,
Joe
hold your
Biden
thoughts.
was the
Can you hold
nominee-
your thought for the other side of the break? I've got to get to this.
Yeah,
break.
go ahead.
We'll be right back, everyone.